greatest gift you've ever received? I want you to close your eyes and think about it. How was your gift packaged? Maybe in a box with a bow, or in a bag full of colorful tissue paper. Or maybe it was too big to be wrapped at all. Who gave you that gift? Was it your parents, your best friend, or maybe someone you've never even met? How did it feel to open your gift and see what was inside? What emotions were you experiencing? What stage of life were you in? Okay, whenever you're ready, you can open your eyes. On July 3rd, 2008, when I was just 3 years, 1 month, and 26 days old, I received the gift of a lifetime, and my world would never be the same again. It all started in the early spring of 2008, when I caught a cold that just wouldn't go away. And so one morning, my mom took me to the pediatrician without an appointment. 15 minutes of being in the office, and I was being transported to the emergency room in an ambulance. The doctor said I was having trouble breathing and needed immediate help. Once we got to the emergency room, they started testing me. Urine tests, blood cultures, x-rays, and everything in between. They diagnosed me with pneumonia. They told my mom she'll be in the hospital for 2 days on IV antibiotics, and she'll go home on oral antibiotics. But things did not go as planned. On day 2, my team discovered that I was in acute kidney failure. That day, I was transferred to the pediatric intensive care unit, and I had my first surgery to start me on emergency dialysis. Once I got to the intensive care unit, the hunt started to find a diagnosis. No one knew what was wrong with me. Every test they ran didn't align with the symptoms I was having, and no one knew how to help me. Until day 5. My blood cultures came back. They diagnosed me with hemolytic uremic syndrome caused by strep 19A. They called it the wrong one to get, because those who survived hemolytic uremic syndrome often had lifelong complications. The day of diagnosis was one of the scariest days of my life. Up to that point, I was a happy and healthy kid and had no previous medical issues. I was only 2 years old. But I was fortunate enough to have a medical team and a family who fought alongside me every step of the way and never gave up on me. I don't remember much from that time. I just remember feeling really uncomfortable and wanting to go home. I didn't understand the gravity of the situation and how close I came to death at that point. After we got my diagnosis, the goal was to filter out the toxins from my body via dialysis and plasmapheresis. But my symptoms were getting worse, and no one knew how to help me. The decision was made to put me into a medically induced coma. I was in critical condition during my entire coma. Multiple times, my parents were told, "It doesn't look like she'll make it through the night. It doesn't look like she'll make it through morning." But somehow, I always made it through. My parents were told that those who suffered from my condition had lifelong complications, including, but not limited to, permanent blindness, brain damage, and irreversible kidney damage. During this time, my family called our priest in to give me last rites, which is a prayer given over someone who is about to pass away. One of my biggest struggles during this time was that my dialysis wasn't working correctly. Because I was so young and so small, it was hard to get the machines to work. I had over 15 surgeries to try and get the dialysis to work as well as my team had hoped. But it never worked as well as my doctors wanted, and it was a constant struggle to try and substitute for the job that my kidneys were now unable to do. After a few weeks, I was stable enough to be woken up. Once I was conscious, they started a whole new round of testing on me. Urine samples, blood tests, blood cultures, x-rays, and everything in between. That was when we got the diagnosis. End-stage renal failure. I was on dialysis, both hemodialysis and peritoneal at different times, but it never worked as well as my family and my team had hoped. So the best option for me was a kidney transplant. I was placed in the United Network for Organ Sharing Transplant list in the US, and the New Jersey one as well. But according to kidneyfund.org, the average wait time for a deceased donor transplant in the US is 5 years. And armed with that knowledge, my parents decided we had to pursue alternative pathways. We chose living donation. My parents both started to be tested to become my donor. My mom was ruled out due to pre-existing medical issues, but my father started testing. And he made it through preliminary testing, and he was just about to start the more rigorous testing. One night, my family was eating our favorite dinner: chicken cutlets, mashed potatoes, and vegetables, when we got the call. It was the hospital. They said, "Drop everything immediately and come. We have a kidney." And so in the early morning hours of July 3rd, 2008, I had my kidney transplant. I've had many surgeries in my life, but I'll never forget waking up from my transplant. I remember opening my eyes and fighting the urge not to fall back asleep. I was sat in a huge leather chair, connected to tubes and machines more than I could count. And they probably gave me a really intense dose of anesthesia, because my first reaction was to scream. And as they started screaming, all of the machines around me screamed as well. Less than a minute later, a nurse in powder blue scrubs came in. She started to quiet all the machines, and 30 seconds later, my mom came in. I'll never forget the look of fear, but also relief on her face that day. And I'm so glad that we got to have such an intimate moment together at such an important day in both of our lives. That night, I was doing so much better that my family was able to come and visit me. Aunts and uncles and older cousins, and they tell me to this day how my color had improved. I was happier, and I was almost back to my pre-illness self. We don't know much about my organ donor. All that we know is that she was a 3-year-old girl from a Hispanic family in New Jersey. She was suffering from a progressive respiratory condition, and her parents made a difficult decision to donate her organs. They were distributed across the country, and I was fortunate enough to receive one of her kidneys. Without my organ donor, I wouldn't be here today speaking to you. And so my hope is to meet her family and thank them for all that they've done in my life. This summer will be 14 years since I've had my kidney transplant. But I'm one of the lucky ones. Every day in the US, 17 people die waiting for an organ transplant. And since I've started speaking to you, 2 more names have been added to the list. In the US today, we have over 100,000 men, women, and children waiting for an organ transplant. And this number is rising much faster than the number of available donors. If there's anything I've learned in the past 14 years through my experiences with kidney disease and organ donation, I learned it on the night of the Hope Affair in 2012. I was selected as the American Kidney Fund's cover artist for their annual Calendar Kids art contest. and I was invited to attend their annual gala in Washington, D.C. I was only 7.5 years old that night, but I remember almost every detail like it was yesterday. I remember curling my hair and putting on my maroon dress. I remember walking into the shiny black limo and getting it to the event hall. I remember walking up to the stage to accept my award. But if there's anything that sticks out in particular, it was what the speaker said that night. In particular, there was one motivational speaker who suffered from a chronic condition. It stopped him from doing many things in his life, but his goal was to climb Mount Everest. And he did it after 3 tries. I was so amazed that someone with so many obstacles and challenges in his life could overcome all of them and do something that most healthy people couldn't do. The lights went off in my head that night. I realized that my transplant wasn't a disability or a disadvantage, but a gift. I realized that I had to go into medicine to help others like myself and advocate for those who were unable to do so. My future came into focus that night under the glowing gala lights of Washington, D.C., surrounded by survivors, supporters, family members, and everything in between. Because of my donor family's decision to donate their daughter's organs, I have been able to do things my medical team and my family would have never imagined. I've graduated elementary and middle school, and currently I'm a junior in high school. I've been able to learn Polish, and I've traveled to meet my extended family in Poland. I've been fortunate enough to attend summer camp, where I've met friends who also have had organ transplants and who suffer from kidney disease. But most importantly, I've started advocating for patients with kidney disease and organ failure. I've always known that my purpose was to advocate for those who were unable to do so. And now I'm so fortunate to be able to say that I do exactly that. This past summer, I got my driver's permit. And part of the paperwork they ask you to fill out when you fill out all the paperwork for the driver's permit is they ask you to go on the Donate Life website and register as an organ donor. I had been waiting my whole life to register as an organ donor. And so once I went on the website and filled in all my information and hit submit, it was such an empowering moment. I can't even put it into words how it felt that night. I just know that I can't wait to see the words organ donor on my official driver's license. Before coming here today, you likely heard the story of someone whose life has been saved by organ transplantation, or you know someone who is in need of an organ transplant. But if there's one thing I want to leave you with tonight, I want you to remember that no gift is too small. Everyone sitting here in this room with us today has the power to give the greatest gift of all, the gift of life, to my organ donor and her selfless family, wherever they may be. I thank them from the bottom of my heart. I will forever be grateful for their contribution to my gift of life.